Okay, so now let's get this stuff into ZBrush. What I'll do is do Alt, sorry, not Alt, I'll press A and then select all. In your default Blender setup, I think you just have to press A and that's it. This is an additional menu that has a whole bunch of other stuff. So I'll select all and then I'm gonna export this as an OBJ. If you don't have this, just go through the menu, regular menu, file save as, or file export as OBJ. So we'll export OBJ. And then I will go to my project here and I'll just create a folder called OBJ. And as I said before, what I usually do is save stuff as I create one OBJ file that's called temp, and I'll save over this constantly because I don't want to have a list of 150 OBJs that are used once. So important in the settings, make selection only. Well, it's not so important now, but when you have like super dense Blender scene with thousands of objects and you only want to export one, and then you don't forget if you forget to select this, it's gonna it's gonna be a pain in the ass. So apply modifiers, include edges, don't care. We don't need material, and let's turn this off as well. I don't know exactly why, but let's do that. Export, there we go. So I'll switch to ZBrush, and then in ZBrush start with a star. To edit mode, this is our base. Okay, so then we will import, and when you import in ZBrush, you may or may not know this. What's gonna do is it's gonna cancel this for a second. What it's gonna do is it's going to take the subtool. Sorry about that. It's going to take the active subtool, which in this case is the star, and it's just going to replace that. So make sure you never press import while you have an important object selected, because it's going to replace it. Okay, so my ZBrush may also look a little bit different than yours. It's just a UI thing, you know, I have a custom UI, not a big deal. So I'll import, and I will go to my project and name the thread OBJ, and here's our temp OBJ import. Now it's complaining that my object has like non-quad faces and all that stuff, and I'll just press make it into quads, and there we go. Alright, so here's our object. Alright, so switch to another material. This is just a, I don't know which material this is. Yeah, it's a default. I have a whole bunch of other ones that you can find, zbrush ones, and then I don't know which ones these are, but they're called AL. I'll have a look. Maybe I'll add them to the description. So how do we go about this next? Let's separate all these objects, and to do this, the easiest way is to go into polygroup and then press auto group. And now if I press Shift F, you'll see that everything has a different color, and I'm sure there's a quicker way of doing this, but I guess I'll do it the hard way. I'll just Control Shift select one of the objects. This is basically isolating the object. So if I Control Shift anywhere in the scene, you'll see that it's just isolated object. So with the object isolated, I'll press Split Hidden. There we go. Now it's a separate object. Split Hidden you will find under here, and then Split Hidden right here. I just have it in a custom menu. And then I'll do the same with the other objects. To switch to a subtool without having to click here, you just hold down Alt and click on the object. There we go. So I'll split this one, Split Hidden. There we go, and this one is already separated. Cool. So what do we start with? Let's see. I guess let's start shaping some stuff. The biggest thing that's out of proportion at the moment, I would say, is the skull. So I pressed X to make sure I'm in symmetry mode. So let's start by scaling this up a little bit actually. So to do this, press W, or this thing here, scale, which actually is E, and then you get your, you know, the, what is it called, transpose tool, and then you just drag it wherever you want, and you can start scaling stuff. Well, so let's see. So if I subdivide this, I'll get something like that, which is fine, but I don't want that. What I want to do is I want to dynamesh. I'm going to dynamesh, which you will find here somewhere. Dynamesh, there we go. And now it's sort of evenly subdivided the geometry, which is great for sculpting. So I'm going to smooth this whole thing out, and now I'm just going to start moving stuff around with the default move brush. I have shortcuts for this, but it's just a move brush. So if you go to B, press B, and then you have all your brushes, and then you'll see move somewhere here. Here we go. So that's that. Let's see. How should this look? I'm gonna control mask some area, and then using the move tool, so pressing W, I'm gonna extrude this. Not extruding, it's just moving the geometry. So this would be for the horns, something like that. So now you'll see that I sort of screwed up the topology or the polygon distribution. And so to fix that, all I have to do is, because Dynamesh is still active, and while it's active I can do control and drag, and then it's gonna redistribute the Dynamesh. So that's that. Let's see, so now I'm just gonna like mess around a little bit with this. Oh, it's really kind of like curved, it's very curved. When you work in ZBrush, you don't want to be too anal about accuracy, and you don't want to be too scared about moving stuff and destroying your object. You know, like if I accidentally do something and I'm like, if I'm constantly thinking like, oh, should I do it like this or this, and you do these micro changes, at this point you shouldn't be doing micro changes, you should be doing very big changes and not being afraid of it. Micro changes are like at the end, when your object is super detailed and you have to add pores and I don't know what you want to add, but that's micro changes. At this point you gotta make big changes and not be afraid to screw up what you have, because what you have right now, like what I have right now, is shit. It's stupid. There's nothing of value in here yet, so you need to, the only way to get to the value is by screwing around with it, you know, by really making big changes. Okay, so I'm looking constantly at this concept, right? I think I need to this back a little bit, and I think I'll do another Dynamesh. I'll increase the resolution of the Dynamesh a little bit to like 360. Be very careful with this, because if I would push this all the way up, my PC is gonna like crash. So and now you see we have a little bit more polygons. So I'll do a quick polish on this, and I don't know where you find it, somewhere here. No, deformation, I think. Yeah, here you go. So just doing this a little bit, and it just kind of overall smooths the whole object. Okay, so Just wanna all I'm doing is looking at the concept and trying to get the proportion kind of the same, or the shape kind of the same. There we go. I'm switching to the flatten brush now, increasing the intensity. I'm just gonna add some actual planes. When I say planes, I mean this is a plane. The flat is like a, yeah, you know what I mean. It's a plane. So it's flat shape. It's easier to judge the actual shape of the object if you make stuff, I guess faceted kind of, or so the flatten brush is very powerful because you can use it not only to flatten stuff but also to actually sculpt. So I'm using it here now to just sort of sculpt in the eye holes. There we go. Then we have the nose here, so I'm gonna go switching to the two. I think this is the clay tubes brush. And there's definitely, I'm kind of off with the shape a little bit. If you want to do this really good, then at this point it might be interesting to like look up some references of actual cow skulls and use it as kind of a guide. I might do that later. I'm not gonna be too bothered about that now, partially because I want to just, this is not a portfolio piece or anything. So, but if you're doing this and you really want to make it good, then that's what I would suggest, is start looking at, how a skull actually should work, or what, because then you'll start being able to add details that maybe even the concept doesn't have, that are gonna make your stuff look good. So I'm using this what is it called? This is a custom brush. It's called MAH cut brush. I'll add in the description where you can get it and who made it. But it's a very nice brush, or it's a set of brushes that is quite nice. So there we go. Okay. So if I feel like I lost too much volume, if you keep smoothing stuff, you'll keep losing volume. You can use the inflat brush, which is this one I just selected, and then as you go over objects, you can sort of inflate it. That's what I'm doing now. I'm just going over it with inflating gradually. Alright, some smoothing everywhere, kind of, and then going to do another. Maybe I should increase the resolution a bit. Let's move it to like 640. There we go. Then polish by feature. Polish by feature compared to polish is basically what it's gonna do is it's gonna keep in mind, okay, you have this kind of hard edge here, or in this concavity, or this cut. Let's try to keep that while I'm smoothing. That's what it's doing, as opposed to polish kind of just like smooths everything. Polish does this, so. And then if you want to an even more extreme version of polish by feature, just use clay polish. And clay polish, you know, does this. It basically forces the hard edges to become a little bit more harder of an edge and or sharper of an edge. So, and then yeah, but we'll do that later. We'll go over that later. So, all right. So I think yeah, let's not linger too long on the skull here. It's not finished. We're gonna come back to it. But at this point, I think it's worth jumping to something else. So, okay, that's too low. Let's increase. So if I try to subdivide the stick, well, it's not that bad actually. Maybe I should subdivide it once. Let's see what happens if I just dynamesh it. Okay, a little bit higher. Yeah, it's better if I dynamesh it. I dynameshed it and now I'm just going over it, smoothing it a little bit. Okay, so now we can I think it definitely needs more. I forgot to add symmetry to this object. Okay, so X, there we go. So what I was going to say is that I need to make okay, so this happens once in a while. This is the original skull, and it's a bug in ZBrush. It just like it forgot that I had split this off, and so instead of splitting it off, it actually created a duplicate. Some stupid shit like that. So don't worry about that. I just like sculpt it out. It's not a big deal. I mean, it might actually be useful. So what we want to do is increase. We want to taper this object a little bit. So meaning that we want to have the top of the stick, or the part where it's inserted into the skull, thicker than the bottom of the stick. So we just do this with the inflat brush, and then gradually, kind of organically shaping it that way. There we go. Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so I'm just gonna make it a little bit more curved. Okay, so then the blade needs to be a bit bigger, I think. Oh, cancel. Move it. Transpose. I think it needs to be like this. Okay. The blade. The blade we're gonna dynamesh at a higher resolution to begin with. Just so that we can keep the shape, I guess. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is I want to flatten this out, but maybe I'll use the lazy mouse to do this. Use the lazy mouse by pressing L, and so this is without lazy mouse, and then lazy mouse is this. It's sort of how to explain this. It lags the mouse, or the mouse comes behind your cursor, so you can get smoother strokes. There we go. Okay, so this needs to definitely be a little bit more like that. And there's this one. See, this one has lazy mouse by default. So could be something like that. And then I notice also in the concept that should be kind of like this. So some people are gonna tell me at this point like, oh, but why don't you just model this? You know, it's like a hard surface object. You can just model this in Blender or Max, and you know, it'll be more accurate. And And yeah, you could do that. I'm not against that. I do that sometimes, you know. But uh, I I look at this object as being a lot more organic, and um, you know, like this is a fucked up shape I get here now. Like it's really, you know, it's kind of screws up the straightness of the whole object. But it's okay. It's not a big deal because, you know, the object is supposed to be kind of handmade. It's not, you know. So it's okay if it's kind of wonky. So there we go. Let's flatten this. If your flatten brush isn't working the way you want it to work, then switch to H polish, which does the same thing as flatten, but it does it in a more advanced way or a more controlled way or something like that. Okay, how is this looking? So there we go. Oh. So I think this actually should still be a bit larger. There we go. Okay, so I'm gonna move away a little bit from the concept, you know, because we're gonna texture it in a PBR kind of way, right? So it and Substance Painter, think of the asset as kind of like stylistic PBR, which is kind of like Overwatch, I think. It's using physically based. It's supposed to be used in a physically based and lighting environment, and so we need to physically texture it in a physically based way. Then it's, I don't know, I guess physically PBR is physically based rendering. A lot of people, I think, a lot of people complicate what that means when they're explaining it. But all you need to know as an artist really is that it's a lot easier for you to texture, because instead of having to, you know, rely on painting and texturing your diffuse map and all the details in the diffuse map, and you can that's not actually a good way to put it. I'm confusing it. I'm doing what a lot of people do, and that's confusing PBR with Substance Painter and Quixel. This is not what PBR means. PBR, essentially what PBR means is that for the artist, if you create an object and you texture it using the requirements that the engine is suggesting that you are texturing it with, the PBR requirements, then it means that no matter in what lighting condition your object will be presented, it will be presented correctly, or it'll be shaded correctly. So if your object is in an underwater environment, or at night, or in broad daylight, in a snowy environment, or in a desert environment, it will react to the light correctly. The metal of the blade will shine correctly as it's supposed to in real life. And that's a bit of an exaggeration, because it's not real life, you know. It's based on, the rendering system is going to be based on kind of how real life works, but it's not really real life. So then you start getting things like values, you know, that metal has a certain specular value, and so it eliminates a little bit artistic artistic interpretation of how metal should look. And if you don't give your specular map the correct value, then it'll start, it won't have the right synergy with the render engine that you're using. So you'll start getting weird results or unpredictable results. And so in general, it's just it's better because the asset that you're making, the character or the object, is gonna be presented in the right way, in the correct way, no matter what lighting condition, ideally. But PBR is something that is a little bit different in every engine that's out there, you know, like every engine has approaches this in a little bit of a different way. So it's not a universal thing, right? So that's that. And then you have Quixel and Substance, and those are, I have to be careful not to jump into detailing here because it's easy to make that mistake. Need to make that blade wider. So Substance is okay. So now I'm gonna switch to the clay tubes, you know, but you'll see that I get this fucked up shit here, and that means I need to turn on backface masking. So it's just gonna avoid me from affecting the back-facing faces. So I'm gonna gradually make this thicker in a very organic way. Right, so I was saying about Substance Painter and Quixel, they are not necessarily directly related to PBR, you know, like you don't have to use a PBR workflow, texturing workflow to use them, but they kind of, you know, that's where the tool becomes very powerful, you know. So basically Substance Painter and Quixel allow people to kind of a little bit forget about the technicalities of texturing, and then they can approach texturing the same way that you can approach modeling in ZBrush. So instead of having to model all of this detail with polygons, I can sculpt it. And just the same way, instead of having to paint in Photoshop your textures, you can paint them in a 3D space. And beyond that, you can work with the materials directly as opposed to having to paint the materials. So if you're using Substance or Quixel, you don't actually have to worry about your painting your normal map or your spec map or your gloss map. You just have to worry about, you can worry about the material. You can worry about the texture holistically as opposed to individually. And you'll see that when I start using the tool, if you're not aware of this already. Because it used to be that we had to paint the specular map individually from the diffuse map and individually from the normal map or the height map or whatever. So there was a lot of room for error. But PBR system, together with tools like Substance and Quixel, have allowed production to get a lot more accuracy and save a lot of time in production. So that's about it. But it's not complicated. Like, you probably don't understand. If you didn't understand it before I started rambling, you probably still don't really understand it, but that's okay. You'll see what I mean. And really, if you're new to the industry, like if you're new to doing this kind of stuff for games, then you shouldn't even have to worry about any of that. You should just learn how stuff is done today, and that's how you'll do your work. Like, most of the ways that we textured in the old days are, you know, it's legacy stuff. It's a bad way of texturing. It's a lot of it is like bullshit tricks that are kind of useless artistically. They're just technical tricks, and you know that no one really enjoys working that way. So it's not worth trying to figure out how people used to do it. in that regard, in my opinion. All right, so this is getting a little bit, I feel like I'm wasting a little bit of time on this, and I'm, you know, not getting the result I need here. So I'm just gonna leave this for now. There we go. At least it has the thickness that I wanted now, kind of. I'm gonna add these little bones, and how am I gonna do that? So I'm gonna switch here, and then I'm gonna go to, what is it? I no, M no, B, yeah. And I'm gonna insert a sphere. Insert sphere. Here we go. Just like, let's see. I'm gonna start with the big one, the big bone, and then I'm gonna just copy paste it, kind of. What I did now is I inserted a sphere on this stick, and by default it was masked out, the stick. So that means that if I tweak, you know, it's not gonna affect the stick. But it's important that I separate these objects, because they're not actually separated now. One piece is just masked out. So to separate, I'll press H, and what H does is it hides the unmasked elements. So now that I have hidden part of my mesh, I'll split hidden, and now I have my sphere separate. Okay. So let's dynamesh the sphere. There we go. Smooth this a little bit, and now let's just start messing around with it. I think something like that. Yeah. It's overlapping the blade, and then using the flatten brush, gonna sculpt this in a little bit. The flatten brush is probably, in my opinion, one of the best sculpting brushes. You can really sculpt with that brush. Like, it's not just to flatten stuff, you can use it to actually sculpt stuff, like to really shape stuff. Oops, isolate. Alright, I think that's about size. I think this is, maybe it's a little bit awkward, a little bit too big. And then switching to the tubes. There we go. Gotta make sure it still has some volume, and then dynameshing it again. Okay, I think we can leave it at this for now. So there's definitely one in between here as well. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna duplicate this, and I guess I'm gonna just move it. But the one in between here is definitely smaller. Well, I think it's just this thing that's smaller, so let's just or it's like broken off or something like that. Okay, like this. So there should be 3 of these bones that are touching the blade, or you know, they're not touching they're touching the blade, but they're holding the blade really. So I'm gonna duplicate this one again and move it over here, and this one make it a bit smaller, and then also there we go. And then I think the blade needs to be a bit bigger. I mean, in the concept it's quite a bit like curved. Alright, so then let's see, so then one more? Is it one more? Yeah, one of them is, we're gonna move this one a little bit back, and then there's one more. Rotate and scale also a little bit. Okay, so this one, we'll go over all of them individually later and, you know, make them a little bit more unique. Oh, okay, so that is good, right? So now I think what I'll do now is I have everything kind of like the important stuff is blocked out, and it doesn't look good, like it looks stupid, but I mean, it has it kind of looks like the outline of the object that we'll need. And there's some pieces here. I think there's a chain attached as well. But what I'll do next is I'll take some screenshots of the asset in Heroes of the Storm to figure out all the other angles and see if we're not missing anything, and then we'll go into a little bit more detail with the sculpt. Well, that's it.